testing video. I had 3 people request me to make this video, but I would have made it without any requests if I'd seen it. Somebody recently made a video about flaws with Sony, Canon, and Nikon, and every camera company has flaws. But no mention had to be made about Fuji. It's like, everybody's kept asking this person, said, why didn't you talk about Fuji? I guess that means Fuji has no flaws. And so, all the Fuji shooters were waiting with bated breath. I was not one of them. I don't give a damn. I own a bunch of Fuji stuff, and I've been into photography a whole lot longer than this person has, and I know what the hell Fuji is, and that's why I've got so much of it. So a statement was made, finally, by this person. I'll give you exact quotes, and I'm going to detail out the 4 statements and why those 4 statements are BS. Okay, the question was finally answered by this person in their video who never mentioned Fuji. He's like, why didn't you mention Fuji? I guess it's got no flaws. And the person answered 4 different things. In no particular order, here's the exact statement. By the way, I didn't address Fuji because Fuji users tend to have no chill about flaws in their gear. I'm assuming that, of course, means they've got no chill factor. They make Pentax users seem laid back by comparison. Well, that is a statement of opinion, and if one feels that way, that's certainly fine. But I know for a fact that of the comments that I get, the people that are the most aggressive, I mean just hardcore aggressive, are Sony people. I mean, I've actually gotten death threats from Sony people. Fuji people are like laid-back Toyota owners. Nikon itself, well, I love the hell out of Nikon. Nikon is an extremely stuck-up company. Actually, anybody that works with Nikon on a retail level and management, they are very stuck-up people. They're kind of like caviar and Rolls-Royce dealers. It's like, well, we don't come to you to push our product. You come to us because we are Nikon. And actually, if you talk to anybody that's dealt with Nikon, they will all say exactly the same thing. But that's Nikon, the company. They're very stuck up. It doesn't mean I still don't love Nikon. Obviously, I've got tons of Nikon stuff. But no, I mean, the most laid-back people I know are Fuji users. So apparently the reason that he didn't, actually the real reason he didn't mention Fuji is because he doesn't like, and that's perfectly valid too. If you don't like Fuji, I don't give a damn. And if you don't mention Fuji because you don't like it and you don't use it, so what? That's a perfectly valid decision. I mean, I don't give a damn if you use or don't use Fuji, but the real reason he didn't mention Fuji, and I knew that to begin with, is because not because he thinks that Fuji people are too sensitive to handle criticism. It's just that he doesn't use the Fuji system. He doesn't know, a single thing about it. And that's okay too. It's like, well, I haven't used Canon and stuff in ages, and I don't talk about Canon stuff. So that's that aspect of it is valid. But to say that Fuji people don't have a chill factor about flaws, that's total nonsense. You're thinking of Sony people, and to a lesser degree Leica fanboys. Those are the people that have no chill factor, so you don't know what you're talking about there at all. Getting to the good bits. Now here's a really, really stupid statement in answer to the question about why you never mentioned Fuji. He says, for me, the biggest mistake is what seems to be a lack of end-user ability, end-user usability testing. Let us take a really close look at that statement. A big mistake of Fuji is what seems to be a lack of end-user usability testing. Do you know what that means? That means that you can't use it and test it. That's one of the most ignorant statements I've ever heard in my entire life. So what the hell does that mean? That's like saying that if you have a Fuji, you can't use it and test it? That is a senseless, dumb, ignorant, unwise, unintelligent statement. That's like me if someone sent me a Sony. It's like, I know you don't like Sony that much, but here's a Sony. Test it for a month or something. And then I would say, well, one of the serious issues with Sony is a lack of end user usability testing. Tell me, what about this camera or any Fuji camera you have a lack of usability testing? You mean you don't know how to use it because you're too lazy to learn how it works? Does that's the only implication you can make from that, because that statement is absolutely nonsensical. Nonsensical. I mean, empirically, no matter what you think, that statement is nonsensical. A lack of end-user usability testing. That statement is 100% undeniably nonsensical. That's saying that you can't test something that you have in your hands. This camera, this particular camera right here, is a Fuji camera. It has no usability testing. Really? Okay, so that statement is obviously just, I mean, that's just stupid. I mean, that's just a dumb statement, period. It's just, here's another peach. If you've ever seen a here's a good one. If you've ever seen a new or experienced photographer pick one up and try to do something basic, now this is the good part. There's some real hogwash, unicorn farts and pixie dust. If you've ever seen a new or experienced photographer pick one up, a Fuji, and try to do something basic, the controls have some real fundamental design problems. Okay, are you listening, Fuji users? Are you listening? Let me repeat that statement for you Fuji users. If you've ever seen a new or experienced photographer pick a Fuji up and try to do something basic, the controls have some real fundamental design problems. Do you see the top of this camera here with ISO and shutter speed? Yeah, that's some real complicated crap right there. I mean, my God. The controls have some fundamental... No, they don't. Before you ever picked up a camera, I was fixing and repairing and using cameras long before you were. You're a slightly older person than me. But that's some serious nonsense. I'm the guy that actually hates most things. I have said implicitly, and it's like, well, is that an opinion? No, I mean, well, that's his opinion, and that's your opinion, and maybe he just feels like, no. The top of no, not the back of the Fuji or the actual menu systems, but the top of this Fuji is pretty much like 40 years worth of camera. You got an ISO dial here, and you got a shutter speed of a here, and you got an exposure comment, and damn, that's some really no. Oh, look, and it's even got a sub-dial right there where your finger should be for choosing matrix metering or a spot metering, and over here you actually have a function dial for letting you shoot single or continuous low, continuous high, or bracketing. Wow, yeah. No. Let me state an empirical fact. Look I've owned several Fujis, Sonys, excuse me. I've owned a Sony A7 for a while. I owned a Sony AC. I love the Sony point-and-shoot cameras like the DSC RX100 Mark II, Mark III. Sony is an extremely convoluted system. Even the Sony users will admit that. This is the most simple, this is more simple, the menu system to use than a damn Nikon is, and I've been using Nikon for ages. Oh my God, look how complicated this is. I hit a menu button, and I have, look, 5 different shooting menus, and then once I go from the shooting menus, I'm able to go to 3 setup. Damn. So let's, Fuji users, the controls on the Fuji have some real fundamental design problems. Really? Who the hell says so? Now, it is absolutely empirically true that if you mess with a new camera system, you're going to have to learn a different set of menus. But there's a difference between a learning curve on a new system and something that has, quote, fundamental design flaws. This is actually the most simple laid out camera, and the X-T2 is the same thing, and the X Pro 2 is the same thing with a little bit slight differences. This is the most simple, rational and intelligent layout system of any camera out there. It's like, well, that's just your opinion, you know. Obviously, any camera you have to get used to. But even if you've gotten used to a camera and you go, this is some fundamental design, You know, that's something different. Okay? I've been using cameras 15 years longer than this person has, and shooting 10 years longer. I have the exact statement from the web. And the exact statement from the web, with an exact quote, is, not meaning me, I have only been taking pictures since about 1998. I have only been taking pictures since about 1998. Well, that's all well and fine. I've been doing it a lot longer than you. The top layout of the... Yeah, this is one damn complicated camera. ISO here, and shutter speed here, and exposure comp... Oh my god, look, there's a shutter release. This must be the design flaw. Right where they stuck the shutter release right here. Jesus Christ. So, are you listening, Fuji users? Now, anybody could have an opinion about anything. So, that just his opinion. Stop being an asshole. Okay. Someone could just say, I just don't like the layout of a camera. That's fine. That's a valid statement. If you, however, think that this has some, quote, fundamental design problems, and no, it does not. It has exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. I've been using Nikon a bazillion times longer than I've been using Fuji. And this is extremely straightforward and simple. And the intuitive nature of how this was designed as far as the menu system and the focus adjustment is the most intuitive system I've ever used. It is. I've been using cameras longer than you. I've been using more cameras longer than you. And sometimes, you know, if someone makes opinions from some, now everybody says, well, and a lot of people do really confuse opinions with empirical facts. It's like, well, that's just your opinion. And I'm like, no, snow is white, and, you know, the sun rises in the east. That's not my opinion. That's just a damn fact. Someone could say, well, I just don't like it. Well, that's valid. That's a valid statement. It's like, I just don't like the way it's laid out. I'm used to doing something different. That's a valid statement. It's a personal opinion, doxa. And there's something else, doxophilia, which would be the love of opinions. Okay? We're talking about episteme here. We're talking about existential facts, and the design, you know, the real fundamental design problems of the controls. No, this is about 40 years worth of camera design. Actually, over 40 years. ISO don't know. So that statement is absolute bunk. It's existentially, it is bunk. Last statement made, and it says the big issue on the Fuji is the ISO 200. Well, this person doesn't know the difference between native gain and applied gain. Okay, most people don't actually know. I made several videos about ISO. ISO is neither sensitivity nor is it native gain. ISO is applied gain. This is actually on professional radios. There's two different knobs. One is volume, which is output. Okay, and then there's another knob for gain. I'm into ham radio. I'm a ham radio operator. There's another knob. It's called gain, and what that is input amplification. So this person actually doesn't even know the difference between native gain and applied gain. But the dynamic range of your camera's sensor decreases with the ISO numbers, but you don't render the images with the sensor. You do that with the camera or an external raw converter software like Lightroom or Iridium for Fuji. Your camera is obviously not just a sensor, it's mostly image processing, 80 converter, SNR firmware, some other things. Fuji APS-C cameras actually offer more dynamic range headroom at ISO 3200 and even more so between ISO 6400 than it does between ISO 200 and 1600. The Fuji camera system actually only processes and stores the real data of the ISOs of 200 and 1600. All other ISOs like 100 and 3200 and 25,000 are simply mathematical divisors of ISO 200. So to get ISO 100 or a multiplication of ISO 1600, this is just a mathematical division. ISO is applied gain or input amplification. ISO in digital has zero connection to exposure. It's like, well, that's part of the exposure triangle. No, what ISO does is it lets you mess with, to your needs, to your liking, mess with aperture and shutter speed. ISO is not exposure. There is nothing that has to do with capturing light at the sensor, at the lens, that is connected with ISO. ISO, just like ham radio, is applied gain. It is input amplification of the signal already past tense received. So the notion that ISO 200 on the Fuji, anybody that's actually a Fuji user, anybody that mentions that, they just roll their eyes and they go, you're just an idiot, you know. It's like, well, ISO, that Fuji got a base ISO of 200. That's a problem. No, it's not. No, it's not. You could actually take this to put it in low and take a shot at ISO 100 on the Fuji, but all that's doing is actually pulling the shot. So Fuji could have ISO 100, but it would just be shooting in ISO 200 and pulling the shot in. But saying the big issue with the Fuji is the base ISO of 200. No, that's not an issue at all. It's not an issue. That's not true. Even like on the Nikon D810, you could shoot in ISO 32, but what it's shooting in is ISO 64 and pulling the shot. There are a lot of cameras that do that. For ideal dynamic range, the base ISO is chosen to be 200 on the Fuji. So this bunk has actually been disproven many times by many different people, and it's completely invalid. And so all of these statements are existentially invalid. Now, if someone says, look, I just hate Fuji, man, I'm used to using... That's a valid statement. Someone says, I just don't, I'm used to using buttons this way or that way, and I'm just not happy because I'm too lazy to learn. That's a valid statement. If someone says, I just don't like, there's just something I don't like about Fuji, I'm used to, these are all valid statements. I mean, I don't give a damn what anybody, I don't make a penny no matter what you buy. People are like, well, you're sticking up for Fuji, you're a Fuji fanboy. Oh, really? No, I bought this system because it's the best camera. And I didn't buy it because it's a mirrorless camera either. I was never sold on mirrorless. Well, sure you're sold on mirrorless. You got a bunch of Fuji cameras and they're mirrorless cameras. No, that doesn't mean I was sold on mirrorless. It means I was sold on it. See, this camera is made in Japan. It's made like a brick house. It is so intelligently well designed and exquisite. Kind of like a fine piece of Tiffany. That is why I bought this damn camera. Not because I'm gonna flip ships and I'm gonna jump in headwater. I'm gonna get into mirrorless. This is something else people don't understand. To me, this is not a mirrorless camera, and it has nothing to do with why the hell I bought it. Well, sure it is. That's a mirrorless camera. No, I bought this camera because it's exquisite, it's excellent, it's intuitive. It's extremely well laid out. Well, this person says that the controls have real fundamental design problems. That's existentially invalid. I'll be the first person to point that. Oh my God, ISO dial and shutter speed. That's some tough crap right there. My God, I mean, it takes a rocket science to figure that one out. That's like 40 years of cameras from Minolta and Nikon and Fuji. I mean, FM2s. I mean, all these, Leica. My God, Leica, look, you got an ISO dial and a shutter speed. Yeah, that's what you're calling a fundamental design problem? The menu system is more simple than Sony is more simple than Nikon is more simple than Pentax by far. I'm not talking about every camera has a learning curve. So you gotta learn how the hell it works. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how intuitive and natively it is laid out so that there is an intuitiveness of how it works. Kind of like on this iPad. This iPad's only got one button. There's one button. Well, there's a volume button and a power button, but it's got one button. This is incredibly intuitive. And Fuji's incredibly intuitive. So I thought I'd share that with you. And I just took 4 exact quote statements and I tore them apart. And it's like, well, you're just being a hater. No, this person's making some nonsensical statements about Fuji, and I'm calling out on it. And that's the amazing one. Is for me the biggest mistake. Now this is an exact quote. For me, the biggest mistake is what seems to be a lack of end user usability testing. What sort of crazy statement is that?